There are things Nate Calloway did without thinking about them first. Not because he was impulsive. He was, if anything, the opposite of impulsive. A man who had learned, at real cost, that instincts were not accidents. That the things you did without pausing to calculate were the truest record of who you actually were. So when he saw the hazard lights blinking through the gray of that October morning, when he saw the silver sedan half pulled onto the shoulder of Route 9 with its nose angled slightly into the grass, he did not pause. He checked his mirror. He moved into the right lane. He put on his own hazards and pulled up behind her. His daughter Mia, who was 7 years old and had her backpack in her lap and her window cracked despite the cold because she claimed the moving air helped her think, said nothing at first. She watched him put the truck in park, watched him unclip his seatbelt. Then she said, in the tone she reserved for observations she considered important, "We're going to be late for school." "I know," Nate said. "Okay," Mia said, and she turned to look at the car ahead of them with the same focused attention she gave everything, complete and entirely without judgment. He was already getting out of the truck. If this story found you this morning, if something in it already feels like something you've been waiting to hear, hit the like button and subscribe to Quiet Kind. Drop a comment and tell me where in the world you're watching from. He didn't know what was on the other side of those hazard lights. Keep watching. He had been a mechanic for 9 years. Before that, he had spent 2 years at the University of Cincinnati in mechanical engineering, which he had not finished, and which he no longer explained to people unless they asked directly, which they rarely did. What he had taken from those 2 years was not a degree, but something more useful, a way of thinking about problems, systems, cause and effect, the specific logic of things that were built to do a job and had stopped doing it. He'd walked away from the program in his 2nd year. Not because he'd failed. He'd been doing fine. But his father had a stroke in February, and someone needed to come home to Millhaven, and Nate was the one who came. He had meant it to be temporary. He had taken a job at a shop on Linden Avenue and told himself it was for 6 months, maybe 8, and then found that he was good at it in a way that mattered more than he'd expected. Not just technically good in the way that felt honest. There was something he trusted about work you could see the result of. An engine that ran or didn't. A problem with a solution or without one. He had spent the years since learning that not everything operated that way. But cars still did, mostly, and he found that comforting in the manner of things that remain true when other things have not. He'd opened Callaway Auto 8 years ago on the east side of Millhaven. A small Ohio city with 1 good diner and 3 decent schools, and a highway overpass that older residents still knew by the name of the man who'd built it back when things like that were noted. And the shop was 1 bay wide with a second-hand lift and a toolbox he'd assembled piece by piece over 3 years, buying what he could afford when he could afford it. He had 1 employee, a man named Garrett, who had been with him from the first month, and who understood, without ever being told, that certain conversations were not had in front of customers. The shop was not prosperous. It was solvent. Nate understood the difference clearly because he checked the numbers every Sunday evening at the kitchen table after Mia was in bed, and the numbers required his full attention to remain what they were. His wife, ex-wife, had left 3 years ago. That was how he thought of it. Not that she had abandoned them, though she had. Not that she had walked out on a 4-year-old who would spend the next 2 years asking questions he didn't always know how to answer, though that was also true. He thought of it as she left, because the other words made something happen in his chest that he had found it was better, most days, to keep still. Sarah had said she wasn't built for this. She'd said it quietly in the kitchen on a Tuesday evening in March, with Mia asleep down the hall. Not cruelly. He had to give her that. She had said it the way people said things they had been thinking for a long time and had finally stopped trying not to say. "I'm not built for this, Nate. I'm sorry. I'm not." He had not argued. He had not asked what this was exactly, though he had wondered. He had sat at the kitchen table for a long time after she left, in the specific silence of a house that had just become different from what it was, and he had listened to Mia breathing through the baby monitor. They'd stopped needing it by then, but he'd kept it running because the sound of her breathing had always settled something in him. And he had made a decision. Not a dramatic decision, not a declaration, just a quiet rearrangement of what he was for. He was for Mia. He was for the shop. He was for the work that needed doing. And for getting his daughter to school on time, and picking her up, and making something for dinner that contained at least 2 things from different food groups, and reading to her at night, even when he was so tired the words blurred, and answering her questions honestly, even when the honest answer was, "I don't know," or "That's complicated," or "Some things just happen and we learn to carry them." He had not been on a single date in 3 years. He told himself he hadn't had time. That was partly true. Mia was in 2nd grade now. She had her mother's dark eyes and his stubborn patience, and a way of looking at the world that suggested she was filing everything carefully for future reference. She talked to the bird families in the yard. She had opinions about stop signs. She asked questions that required Nate to sit with them for a while before answering. Last spring, she had asked him why he always pulled over for people with car trouble. He had thought about it. "Because someone always has to," he'd said. "And I know how to help." She had considered this with the seriousness she brought to most things. Then she'd said, "What if the person you stopped for was someone really important?" "Doesn't matter who they are," he'd said. "Hazard lights mean hazard lights." She had looked out the window at something only she could see. "I'm going to remember you said that," she told him. He'd laughed. "Good," he said. "Hold me to it." The woman was standing at the rear of the silver sedan with her phone to her ear and her free hand flat against the trunk, as if steadying herself. She was wearing hospital scrubs beneath a gray wool coat. The coat unbuttoned, not because it was warm, it wasn't, but because she hadn't had time to button it. There was a badge on a lanyard around her neck, the kind that hospitals issued, though Nate didn't read it yet. What he saw first was her posture. She was not the posture of someone who had accepted that they were stranded. She was the posture of someone who had not yet accepted it and was running out of time to keep refusing. Her head turned when he got out of the truck. She looked at him the way people did when they needed something and were in the process of assessing whether this particular person could provide it. He held up one hand. Not a wave. Just, "I'm here. I see you. Give me a minute." She said something into the phone, short, clipped, and lowered it. "Front left tire," he said as he crouched beside the wheel. The tire had blown cleanly. A screw, probably. The kind of thing that gave you no warning and no good options. He could see the spare was accessible. 12 minutes, maybe 15, if the lug nuts cooperated. You hear it go?" "About 3 miles back," she said. "I thought I could make it to the exit." Her voice was controlled. The way voices became controlled when the person using them was working hard to keep them that way. "You almost did." He stood. "You have somewhere you need to be." It was not a question. He could see it in everything about her. The scrubs, the badge, the way she kept glancing at her phone screen even while she looked at him. She exhaled. The exhale of someone who had been trying not to do exactly that. "I have a surgery," she said. "It starts at 8. The patient is 9 years old." She paused. I'm trying to reach the hospital to..." "How far?" 14 minutes. If I leave in the next..." She checked her phone. 6 minutes, I might still..." "Get in," Nate said. She looked at him. "I've got a 7-year-old in the truck," he said. "We'll drop you. I'll come back and change the tire. Leave the car at the exit lot. You can arrange pickup from there." He was already moving. "You'll have to navigate. I don't know this stretch well." "You can't. I'm already late for school drop-off," he said without breaking stride. "Might as well be useful about it." Behind him, from the truck window, a small voice. "Hi." The surgeon turned. Mia was leaning out, watching her with the unblinking attention she reserved for things she found genuinely interesting. "I'm Mia," Mia said. "My dad fixes cars. He's really good at it." A pause. "Are you a doctor?" "I am," the surgeon said. "What kind?" "Heart." Mia absorbed this, looked at her father, looked back at the woman in the unbuttoned coat with the phone in her hand and the urgency written into every line of her. Then, with the quiet finality of someone who has received all the information she needs, "You should probably get in." The surgeon stood there for one moment in the October cold, the hazard light still blinking orange against the gray shoulder of Route 9, and something moved across her face that she did not have time to name. Then she walked to the passenger door and got in. Nate was already behind the wheel. He put the truck in drive. He did not know her name yet. He did not know, in those first few minutes of silent speed down Route 9, that the woman in the passenger seat ran the cardiothoracic surgery program at St. Augustine Medical Center, that she had rebuilt it from a department with a 17% complication rate into one of the top 5 programs in the state, that she had been featured in the kind of journals that non-doctors never read, and that her name meant something, in the world she inhabited, that felt nothing like her this morning. Sitting in a stranger's work truck with a child's backpack nudging her elbow and a pine tree air freshener turning slowly from the rearview mirror. He did not know any of that. He just knew a 9-year-old was waiting on a table somewhere, and this woman needed to get there, and he had a truck and 14 minutes and nothing in him that could have made the calculation come out differently. He drove. Her name was Dr. Elena Vasquez. He learned that from Mia, not from the badge, which he never looked at closely. It wasn't his business. Not from the surgeon herself, who spent the first 4 minutes of the drive with her phone at her ear, speaking in the careful shorthand of someone accustomed to communicating across urgency. 8:15 at the latest, yes, keep him prepped, tell Reeves to scrub in and stand by, I'm 7 minutes out. From Mia, who had read the badge through the gap between the seats with the focused efficiency of a child who had taught herself to read at 5 and considered that skill applicable in all situations, and who said, at a pause in the phone call, tilting slightly toward the passenger seat, "Your name tag says Elena. Is that your name?" The surgeon, Elena, lowered the phone for a moment, looked at the small face regarding her from the back seat. Something shifted in her expression. Not softened exactly, more like recalibrated. "It is," she said. "I'm going to remember you," Mia told her. "Because you're going to fix someone's heart today, and that's important." Elena Vasquez looked at this 7-year-old for one full second in a way that suggested she was not accustomed to being spoken to like that. Like a person. Simply, directly, without performance or agenda. "I hope so," she said quietly. Then she raised the phone again. Nate said nothing. He drove. He took the Oak Street bypass without being told because he knew from the radio that the interchange was backed up. He told Elena this in 2 sentences. She nodded, already back on her phone, but he saw her right hand move from the door handle to her lap. A small release of tension, in the kind people made when they had just stopped bracing for the next thing to go wrong. She directed him through the final 3 turns from memory, not from the phone's map. And when St. Augustine came into view, the wide glass face of the main building catching the pale October light. He pulled into the ambulance bay because it was the fastest, and it was obvious, and he was already thinking about turning around. She was out of the truck before he'd fully stopped. Then she paused, turned back. She looked at him through the open passenger door. This man she had known for 11 minutes, who had grease-worked permanently into the creases of his knuckles, and a pine tree air freshener, and a child who spoke to strangers like they already deserved kindness. "I don't know your name," she said. "Nate," he said. "Nate Calloway." She said it back to herself once, the way people committed things to memory. Then, "Thank you." It was 2 words, but the way she said them, stripped of everything except what she meant, made them something more than 2 words. Nate nodded once. She was already gone, moving through the sliding doors at a pace that was not quite running but would have been on someone with less practiced composure. Mia watched the doors close behind her. Then she looked at her father. "She's going to be okay now," Mia said. Not a question. "She's going to be great," Nate said. He put the truck in drive. They were 12 minutes late for school. Mrs. Patterson at the front office was used to it. He went back for the car. Of course he did. He'd said he would. The spare was accessible. The lug nuts were stubborn but not impossible, and it took him 19 minutes in the October cold with his hands going numb by the third nut and his breath fogging the air above the wheel well. He worked the way he always worked, without rushing, without wasted motion, with the specific economy of a man who understood that hurrying and being efficient were not the same thing. When it was done, he drove the silver sedan to the exit lot at the Route 9 interchange, locked it, photographed the lot number and bay, and sent a text to the number Elena had given him before she'd gotten out of the truck. "Cars at exit 14 lot, bay C7, keys under front left mat. Spare is good for about 50 miles. Get the tire properly replaced before highway driving." He looked at the message for a moment. Then he added, "Hope the surgery went well." He didn't expect a response. She was in an operating room. She'd be there for hours. He pocketed his phone and drove to the shop. Garrett was already there when he arrived, 40 minutes past opening. He was under a Honda Accord that needed new brake lines, and he said nothing about the time except to gesture toward the coffee maker with one grease-darkened hand, which was how he communicated most things. Nate poured a cup, stood at the workbench, and looked at the day's appointments. 2 oil changes, a transmission diagnostic he'd been putting off because he didn't like the customer's attitude, and a vintage Mustang restoration he actually looked forward to the way some people looked forward to things they'd earned. The morning moved the way mornings at the shop moved. The coffee got cold, and Garrett found the second brake line problem and said 3 words about it. A customer called to reschedule. The Mustang arrived on a flatbed, and Nate spent 20 minutes just looking at it before he touched anything. He did not think about the surgeon constantly. He was not that kind of man. But he thought about Mia saying, "You're going to fix someone's heart today, and that's important," with the complete sincerity of someone who had not yet learned to protect herself from meaning what she said. He thought about the way Elena Vasquez had looked at his daughter in that moment, like she had been handed something she hadn't known she was missing. He thought about a 9-year-old on a table. He hoped the 9-year-old was okay. The call came at 2:47 in the afternoon. Not a text. A call. Unknown number. But the area code was local. He answered it the way he always answered calls during shop hours, standing, already half thinking about whatever he'd been doing before it rang. "Mr. Calloway." He recognized her voice immediately. Not because it was remarkable. It was controlled and precise and carried no wasted warmth. But because you remembered voices that had said thank you the way she had. "Dr. Vasquez," he said. "Surgery go all right?" A pause. Not the pause of someone deciding what to say. More like the pause of someone who had been asked a question they were still processing. "He's in recovery," she said. "He's going to be fine." "Good," Nate said. And he meant it the same way she'd said thank you. Without decoration. Another pause. He waited. He was good at waiting. It was one of the things the shop had taught him. Or maybe something he'd already known, and the shop had given him space to practice. "I wanted to," she started, then stopped. Which surprised him. She did not seem like a woman who started sentences she couldn't finish. "The hospital administration would like to send compensation for—" "That's not necessary," he said. "You spent nearly an hour." "I changed a tire and drove 14 minutes, he said. "I've done harder things before breakfast." He heard something on her end of the line that was almost, not quite, a sound of surprise. Like she had encountered something she hadn't prepared for. "I'd like to bring the car in for the proper tire," she said, recalibrating. Back to practicalities. "Your shop." "That works," Nate said. "I can get you in Thursday afternoon." "Thursday?" A brief pause. "All right, on Thursday. He wrote it in the book after he hung up. Vasquez, silver sedan, tire replacement, 2 p.m. Garrett looked over his shoulder without being obvious about it, the way Garrett looked at everything. New customer? Garrett said. Tire blowout this morning on Route 9, Nate said. Pulled over to help. Garrett nodded. This was not new information about Nate. He went back to what he was doing. She arrived Thursday at 1:53. He noticed that. The 7 minutes early. He filed it without comment because it wasn't his business, but it told him something about how she moved through the world, accounting for variables, building in margins, not trusting circumstances to hold. She was different out of the October emergency. Still precise, still composed. He's still carrying that quality of deliberate self-containment that he had noticed on the roadside and chalked up to stress. But the stress was gone now. What remained was something quieter. She looked around the shop the way people looked at things they were genuinely seeing for the first time and finding more interesting than they'd expected. She looked at the Mustang. 68, she said. He turned. You know Mustangs? My father had one. She said it neutrally, but the neutrality had a particular shape. The shape of something that was not nothing. He was not good at fixing things, but he was very good at acquiring them. Nate looked at her for a moment. Then he went back to the paperwork. Nah, we'll have you out in 40 minutes. She sat in the waiting area, 2 plastic chairs and a low table with a bowl of wrapped candies that Mia refreshed every week because she'd decided it was important. And she opened her laptop and worked. Nate changed the tire. At the 20-minute mark, he became aware that she had stopped typing. He glanced up. She was looking at the Mustang, not the way people looked at old cars as decoration, the nostalgic, slightly performative appreciation of something pretty. She was looking at it the way he looked at it, like she was thinking about what it had been, and what it would be, and what the distance between those two things required. What happened to it? She asked. Sat in a barn for 16 years, he said, not stopping what he was doing. Previous owner bought it in '91, drove it 2 summers, and then had kids. It's been waiting since 2007. And someone found it. His son found it, Nate said. Cleaning out the estate. He paused. Sometimes things wait for the right time. She looked at him then, briefly. He had gone back to the tire. My father's Mustang was red, she said. He sold it when I started medical school. He said it was a practical decision. Another pause. I don't think it was. Nate set down his Torque wrench. What do you think it was? Elena Vasquez looked at the '68 Mustang in the bay of a small shop on the east side of Mill Haven, Ohio, and said, very quietly, not performing the words, just saying them, I think he wanted me to see him make a sacrifice, so I would know what I meant to him. The shop was quiet. The lift hummed somewhere behind them. Garrett had stepped out for lunch. Did it work? Nate said. She didn't answer immediately. When she did, there was something in her voice that had not been there before. Something small and carefully kept, like a light in a room that's been closed for a long time. He died my 2nd year of residency, she said. He never saw me operate. Nate set his hands flat on the hood of the silver sedan and looked at her. Not with pity. He understood, instinctively and completely, that this woman would not want pity. He looked at her the way you looked at someone who had just told you something true. He knew anyway, Nate said. Men who sell their car for someone, they know. Elena Vasquez did not respond to that. She looked at the Mustang for another moment, then back at her laptop. But she did not type anything. Mess he found out by accident, the way he found out most things that turned out to matter. Mia came home from school the following Monday with a drawing she had made during free period. She was always making drawings. The flat surfaces of their house were a running archive of her interior life. And she held it up for him at the door. It was a heart. anatomically specific in the way that suggested she had looked something up, with a small figure beside it in blue crayon, wearing what appeared to be scrubs. "That's Dr. Elena," Mia said. "I told Harper about her, and Harper said her mom saw her on the news." Nate looked at the drawing. "What news?" "The hospital news." Mia took the drawing back, considered it critically, added a small detail with a red crayon. "Harper's mom said doctor. My Elena is the most important heart doctor in Ohio." She looked up at him. "Is that true?" He didn't answer immediately. He took out his phone, did what he should have done, by any ordinary calculation, before he'd written her name in the appointment book. He typed it into the search bar. Dr. Elena Vasquez, St. Augustine Medical Center, cardiothoracic surgery. The results came back in seconds. He stood in the doorway of his own house, in the afternoon light, with his daughter's crayon drawing on the counter beside him, and he read, "Director of Cardiothoracic Surgery, rebuilt the program in 4 years. The youngest person to hold the position in the hospital's history. A paper in the New England Journal of Medicine cited over 300 times. A grant from the National Heart Foundation. Like a profile in the State Medical Journal from 2 years ago, a photograph of her in the operating room, and a pull quote that read, 'The best outcomes are built before the first incision. They're built in the 1,000 decisions that happen before the patient is ever on the table.'" He looked at the photograph for a moment. She looked the same as she had sitting in his waiting area, looking at a '68 Mustang and telling him about a red car her father had given up for her. He set his phone face down on the counter. "Dad," Mia said, "is it true? Is she the most important one?" Nate looked at his daughter, at the drawing she'd made, the careful anatomical heart in blue crayon, and the small figure in scrubs standing beside it with the unconditional conviction of a 7-year-old who already understood something it took most people decades to learn, if they learned it at all. "Yeah," he said, "I think she might be." Mia nodded, satisfied. She put the drawing on the refrigerator with a magnet shaped like a state of Ohio. "Good thing you stopped," she said, and went to get a snack, because that was the whole of the matter as far as she was concerned. Complete and sufficient, and requiring no further analysis. Nate stood in his kitchen. He looked at the drawing on the refrigerator, the heart in blue crayon, the small figure beside it. He thought about hazard lights on a gray October morning. About some things are just obvious. About a 9-year-old in recovery somewhere in St. An Augustine who would never know the name of the man who made sure his surgeon got there. He thought about the way Elena Vasquez had said he knew anyway would have landed if he'd said it to someone else. How it might have sounded like a comfort. Something offered to make grief smaller. He had not meant it that way. He had meant it the way he meant most things. As fact. As something he actually believed. He was still thinking about that when his phone buzzed. A text. Her number. "The patient went home today. Thought you should know." He read it twice. He looked at it for a long moment in the particular stillness of his kitchen at 4 in the afternoon, with a crayon heart on the refrigerator and Mia in the other room and the sound of the neighborhood settling into evening outside the window. Then he typed back, "Thank you for telling me." But he set the phone down. He didn't notice yet that she had not needed to tell him that she could have let it be a closed thing. A flat tire, a favor, 2 strangers who had met in the particular way that emergencies produced and separated just as quickly. That there was no practical reason to have sent that text. He didn't notice yet. But he would. If this story has found its way to you, if you've stayed this far, make sure you subscribe to Quiet Kind and turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. Your support is what keeps these stories coming. And there are so many more waiting to be told. The texts continued. Not often. Not in a way that announced itself or asked to be named. Just occasionally. The way things grew in October weather, quietly, without making demands. And the tire is holding up well. He had sent that one, 7 days after she'd left the shop. I didn't doubt it. She had sent that back within 4 minutes, which told him she was not in surgery. Then, after a pause, "How is Mia?" He had looked at that question for a moment. The fact of it, that she had remembered the name, that she had asked. "She put your drawing on the refrigerator," he wrote. "The one she made. It's still there. Tell her I said thank you." He had told Mia. Mia had accepted this information with the gravity it deserved, and then gone back to whatever she was doing, which was the way Mia processed most things. Fully, then completely, without residue. November arrived the way it arrived in Ohio. Not dramatically, but with intent. The mornings went dark faster. The shop got cold in a way that the space heater in the corner never quite addressed, and Nate wore his work jacket indoors from the first week of the month, which Garrett noted without commenting on. The calls had started by then. Not from Elena. From the hospital. St. Augustine's facilities director, a man named Breckler, who had the specific quality of confidence that came from never having been wrong about anything small, called on a Tuesday to discuss whether Calloway Auto might be interested in a service contract for the hospital's fleet vehicles. 14 vehicles. Routine maintenance, priority scheduling for breakdowns. A number attached to it that Nate did not write down immediately because he was trying to decide how he felt about it first. He said he'd think about it. He did think about it. That Sunday evening at the kitchen table, with the numbers in front of him, he thought about it with the full attention it deserved. The contract would change things, not transform them. He was too careful a man to use that word about something he hadn't seen proved yet, but change them. The shop loan had 14 months left on it. The lift needed a part he'd been putting off. Mia was going to need a different school in 2 years, the kind that cost something, and he had been making a plan for that with the methodical patience of a man who understood that plans required years, not moments. He called Breckler back on Monday and said yes. He did not connect this to Elena. He had not been told to expect it and had not asked for it, and there was no reason, on the surface, to connect a hospital facilities contract to a cardiac surgeon. And he filed it as separate. An outcome of proximity, maybe. A referral, secondhand. He was wrong about that. He would find out later how wrong. The thing that undid his careful filing happened on a Wednesday. He was under the hood of a fleet vehicle. A hospital shuttle van, first of the new contract's regular services. When he heard the shop door, he assumed it was Garrett, who had gone for sandwiches. It was not Garrett. He heard Mia first, which meant school was out, which meant it was after 3, which meant he had been under this hood for longer than he'd calculated. She came through the side entrance the way she always did on the days his neighbor, Mrs. Okafor, dropped her. Backpack thumping, shoes squeaking on the concrete floor, voice arriving before the rest of her. "Dad, Mrs. E. Okafor says..." And then she stopped. Nate straightened up. Elena Vasquez was standing just inside the shop door. She was not in scrubs. She was in the kind of coat that suggested she had come from somewhere that expected that kind of coat. Dark charcoal, well cut, the badge from the hospital absent. She was holding 2 cups from the coffee place on Meridian Street that Nate had never been to because the prices were not structured for a man who drank 4 cups a day. She looked at Mia. Mia looked at her. "You're Dr. Elena," Mia said. "I am," Elena said. "You came." Mia said this not with surprise, but with the tone of someone whose expectations have been confirmed. Then she looked at the cups. "Is one of those hot chocolate?" "One of them could be," Elena said. Something had shifted in her face the moment Mia had walked in. A loosening. Precise and involuntary. The way things loosened in people when they encountered something they had not known they needed. "Okay," Mia said. She put her backpack down on the chair and sat in it with the composed authority of someone who had decided to stay. Nate wiped his hands on a rag. He looked at Elena. He did not ask why she was here because the answer felt like something that should be allowed to arrive on its own. She held out the second cup. He took it. "I wanted to tell you something in person," she said. He waited. She looked at him steadily, the way she looked at everything, direct and without performance. And she said, "The contract, the fleet vehicles, that was me. I want you to know that." Nate looked at the cup in his hands. "I didn't ask Breckler to call you," she said. "I asked the hospital board, directly." A pause. "I told them I had found the most reliable mechanical shop in Millhaven and that the fleet had been underserviced for 2 years and that we were paying 40% more per vehicle than we needed to. All of that is true." "It is," he said. "But I also told them," she said, "that the man who runs this shop pulled over on Route 9 on a Tuesday morning when he had somewhere to be, changed my tire in the cold, drove me to a surgery that could not have waited, and texted me the bay number of the lot where he left my car, and charged me nothing. Not for the ride, not for the time." She paused. "I told them that was the kind of person I wanted servicing vehicles that carry my patients." The shop was quiet. From the chair, Mia was watching them both with the focused stillness she used when she understood that something important was happening and had decided not to interrupt it. Nate looked at Elena for a long moment. "You didn't have to do that," he said. "I know," she said. "That's why I did it." He found out the rest of it gradually, not all at once. Elena was not a woman who delivered information dramatically. She delivered it the way she delivered everything. In the right order, with the right amount of detail, without excess. He found out that the boy whose heart she had repaired that October morning had a complication in week 3 of recovery. A minor arrhythmia, caught early, corrected. That she had called his parents herself at 11 o'clock at night to explain what had been found and what had been done, and what would happen next, because she did not believe that kind of call should come from anyone but her. He found out that she had been at St. Augustine for 6 years, that she had been recruited by 3 other hospitals in that time, 2 of them larger, one of them in a city she had actually considered, and had stayed because the program she had built was not finished yet and she did not leave things unfinished. He found out that she lived alone in a house on the west side of Millhaven that she had bought 3 years ago and had not fully furnished, because she said, without any particular emphasis, she had not had time. "Or someone to do it with," Mia said one afternoon, and with the bluntness of someone who considered facts friendly. Elena looked at her, then at Nate. Nate looked at the ceiling. "She does that," he said. "I've noticed," Elena said, and something in her voice, dry, precise, the architecture of a smile without committing to one, made him look at her properly, the way he had been carefully not looking at her for several weeks, with the specific discipline of a man who understood the difference between what he noticed and what he allowed himself to do about it. She was looking back. Neither of them said anything. Mia finished her hot chocolate and announced she had homework, and the afternoon settled into the particular kind of quiet that wasn't empty. There was a moment, in December, that Nate would think about later as the one that changed the direction of things. Not a dramatic moment. Nothing Elena would have written in a journal if she kept one, which he doubted. Nothing Mia would have noticed as different from any other afternoon. They were in his kitchen. Elena had stopped by. She had taken to stopping by in the unhurried way of someone who had decided to allow themselves something. And Mia was doing homework at the table and the radio was on low and something was on the stove that Nate had been tending to between other things. Elena was standing at the counter looking at the refrigerator, at the crayon heart, the small figure in blue beside it. Still there, 2 months on. That's because Mia had defended its position against 3 separate refrigerator reorganizations with the conviction of someone protecting something important. Nate looked up from the stove. Elena didn't turn around. She was just looking at it, in the way that people looked at things when they didn't know anyone was watching, which was the only way you ever saw what anything really meant to them. He watched her look at the drawing his daughter had made of a woman she'd met once for 11 minutes in a truck on Route 9 and decided, with the complete and uncomplicated certainty of a 7-year-old, was worth remembering forever. He thought about hazard lights, about the arithmetic of small decisions, the ones you made without calculating, the ones that turned out to be the map of who you were. Pull over or don't. Answer or don't. Stay or don't. He thought about a 9-year-old who went home, about a red Mustang sold for a daughter who never got to show her father what she became, about Mia saying you're going to fix someone's heart today with the total sincerity of someone who had not yet learned to protect herself from meaning what she said. And the way Elena had looked at her in that moment, like she had been handed something she had stopped believing existed. She's going to be a doctor, Elena said quietly, still looking at the drawing. Mia. She says she's going to be an engineer, Nate said. She'll change her mind. A pause. She sees things. Nate turned the heat down on the stove. Yeah, he said. She does. Elena turned around, looked at him across his own kitchen in the December light, and with the composed and careful expression of a woman who had built an extraordinary life and filled it with everything except the thing that made a space feel like a place you came back to. I'm not good at this, she said. Not an apology. A fact, delivered with the same precision as all her other facts. I work too much. I don't furnish my house. I have not had a real conversation with someone that wasn't about medicine or hospital administration in... She paused, appeared to calculate. Longer than I'd like to say. Until Route 9, Nate said. Until Route 9. He looked at her. I'm not good at it either, he said, for different reasons. I know, she said. I think that might be the point. Mia looked up from her homework, looked at her father, looked at Elena. He made the swift and comprehensive assessment of a child who had been paying close attention her entire life, and said, with complete calm, Are you guys going to figure it out, or do I have to help? And Elena Vasquez, director of cardiothoracic surgery, rebuilder of programs, the most important heart doctor in Ohio, a woman who had not laughed the unreserved kind in longer than she would tell you. Laughed. Really laughed. In Nate Calloway's kitchen, with a crayon heart on the refrigerator and homework on the table and something good on the stove. The sound of it moved through the house like weather changing. Nate looked at his daughter, who had gone back to her homework with the satisfied expression of someone whose work here was done. Then he looked at Elena. Thursday, he said. Dinner. Somewhere that isn't the shop and isn't a hospital. She considered this for exactly one moment. I'll be there at 7, she said. I'll be early. I know, he said. Here is what Mia understood, in the way that children understood things before anyone had taught them to doubt it. That her father was a man who stopped, not just for cars, for things, for people, for the small emergencies that most people drove past because they had somewhere to be and someone else would surely handle it. He had always been that way. She had been watching him her entire life. The way he fixed Mrs. Okafor's gate without being asked. The way he let the kid from the apartment building use the shop's compressor on weekends. The way he answered the phone on the 3rd ring instead of the 1st because he thought it was polite to let people prepare. She had known, from the moment she'd seen Elena Vasquez standing on the shoulder of Route 9 with her coat unbuttoned and her phone in her hand and the particular posture of someone who had run out of time to keep refusing what was happening. She had known that this was one of the ones. Not every stop was one of the ones. Most were just flat tires. But this one, she had felt it the way she felt things. Completely, immediately, and without being able to explain how. She had kept the drawing on the refrigerator not because she had been told to, but because she understood, in the wordless way of people who pay close attention to the world around them, that it was a record of something, that it belonged in a visible place, that some things needed to stay in front of you. And this is what Nate would think about in the quiet moments that came after the Thursday dinner that became a Friday lunch that became a habit with the gradual permanence of things that were always going to happen. When he thought about what it meant to live a life that was worth the name, he had not pulled over for a surgeon. He hadn't known she was a surgeon. He hadn't known she was anything except a person with hazard lights on a gray October morning who needed something he could give. That was the whole of it. That was the beginning of everything. He had not been looking for his life to change. He had been looking at hazard lights. And what he understood now, and in the way that things became clear not in dramatic moments but in the accumulated weight of ordinary afternoons, the kind where someone leaves their coat on your chair and your daughter draws hearts in crayon and the coffee is made for two without either of you deciding to make it that way, was this. The right eyes are always watching. Not in the sky, not in some distant reckoning. In the truck, at the kitchen table, in a second-grade classroom where a girl files everything carefully for future reference. In the small, exact, personal courage of a man who stops. Not because someone important might be in the car, but because someone is. That was all it ever was. That was all it needed to be. Thank you for sitting with this story all the way to the end. The people who stay for the whole story are the ones who understand it. If it moved you, if something in Nate or Elena or Mia found its way into something you've been carrying, the videos on your screen right now are waiting to do the same. And if you haven't subscribed yet, come home. Quiet Kind has a story for you.